often just paint what I'm curious about. So I really just kind of jump around from medium to subject matter. I don't really stick to one subject matter. So this particular series was kind of a time capsule from my travels. I like to travel a lot, and it was little bits and pieces of different places in my life that I've traveled to over the years. And I really wanted to pull at the juxtaposition and bring in some contrast with my light darks with the pieces. So I wanted to really pull on the emotions. I'm thinking of these places I had, negative or positive emotions going through, and I really wanted to bring out kind of that juxtaposition of my own emotions, but also for the viewer as well. So by finding the light in life, I really felt that I could push forward. So you're always looking at the positive and looking at the light, even in those darker moments in time. So some of those pieces have that really dark sky, and that's kind of representative of there's little bits of light that kind of seep through at the bottom, and it can always be there. So just kind of going into that shadow and the light and darkness. As for the style, I really wanted to reduce the subject matter to its most basic form. So taking the landscapes and really making them abstract. And I did that. I started off actually working from my travel photographs. I like to take photos just as a hobby, and my first pieces were coming out a lot more realistic than I wanted them to be. So I kind of stepped back and pushed the photographs aside and was actually going more from my memory and my feeling of the trip as opposed to looking at the photograph. And then I started to bring in more of that abstract feel that I was hoping for into the pieces. And actually at the time I was dealing with a neck and nerve injury in my right arm, which actually allowed me to hold the brush a lot more looser because I had to. So that's where a lot of those broad brush strokes came, because I was standing further back, I was working with longer brushes, and so I did end up having a lot more a looser brushwork than I normally do. My background is in graphic design, so it can be a little bit more refined than some of my pieces. So these pieces were much more expressionistic and using the palette knife, and it was a great way for me to kind of loosen up actually as an artist. So I suppose it was not the best thing to be injured, but it was actually a great outcome for me to kind of test and try different techniques in my artwork. And then I usually don't paint in plein air. I usually take photographs and bring it back to my studio, but I'm constantly inspired by nature. A lot of these are actually seascapes, but I do live by the trails and I'm constantly looking at shadow and light and how it plays in nature. And so you'll see a lot of that in my pieces, as well as playing a lot with the composition. I wanted a vastness. So I either have a really high horizon line or really low horizon line, because I really wanted the viewer to almost take a breath when they're looking at the work. So you can kind of just have either the spaciousness of the sky above you, or I wanted to have a really spaciousness of the fields below, or the coastal line below. So I work, these were both in acrylic and oil, and sometimes I paint an acrylic underpainting, and then I decide throughout the piece that maybe I want a little bit more blended, kind of that butteriness of the oils, and you'll see that in particular in one of the sky paintings. And so then I switched from acrylics to oils, so I have that acrylic underbase, and then I went to the oils, and then some are just
so the oil is on top of the acrylic?
It is, on a couple of them. And then some of them I stuck with the acrylics because that's just kind of the style I wanted, and then others started with oils from the start. So I kind of, I love to work in different mediums, and so I have a hard time sticking to one throughout the collection. So, and then I really wanted kind of that blended meltedness, because it was just a little bit too defined when I had the acrylics. And so I did come over it with the oils to just give it that real blendedness at the top. Versus this one that I worked in just acrylics and brought in a lot of that texture with the palette knife, and then a lot of drips of paint at the beginning to give it kind of that watered down look as well. So yeah, so I work in bright colors a lot of times, like jewel tones mixed in with neutrals. But for this one, I think I just went a little bit more neutral with some pops of color. So, you guys have anything?
So when you mentioned the horizon,
Yes.
I don't know if you saw the movie Beetlejuice. Anyway, it's just a set that there's a scene at the end of this where he goes in. As in look at these two Western pieces.
Yeah.
He's quizzing his character about what are they, and what's different about them. And both of those were, it was the horizon.
The horizon.
And it was not in the middle, or maybe one of them was the other. He was talking about, it's just so fucking boring when it's in the middle. and I'm really drawn to that because there's part of me that's like this symmetrical guy,
right?
Or it's kind of like I want to do,
right?
But then I'm really like when I was looking at stuff, I was really drawn to that. It was done with that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, they play with that a lot in cinematography. You'll notice it a lot more where they're bringing that vastness their one way and making it really light and bringing that sky in, and it gives it a completely different feel than seeing the foreground where you see fields or the ocean or whatever you make of it, and it almost brings you either closer or further away. And that's kind of where the emotions came in, where sometimes we wanted to keep them a little more distant for me, and versus something that I'm closer to, wanting to hold on to a little bit more.
Sounds like maybe minor chord music, one is sort of soft and inviting, the other is
yes,
powerful.
Yeah, and that's where I wanted to have both. It's just really highlighting this contrast in our own lives.
Yeah. Where were the travels?
All over. So some were Maine, Northern California, New Zealand. I had just a little bit of everywhere. So yeah. Thank you.